and that's what I love about this technique is I can use it on anyone, and it doesn't have to be, it's not painful for the most part. You know, if I know the trigger point, that's a little painful.
Yeah,
but
the only time that it's painful
fine.
is when we're poking a point.
Right.
And we use points for, you know, diagnostic purposes and to tell what joint or what is irritated. So that's kind of a little bit different than some other systems that are out there where you have a point that's actually using to affect some kind of you know, clinical effect, whereas we just use them as a window into the body, and they show us what spinal segments are irritated. So what I love about this work is understanding the segmental anatomy, because then you can trace things back to the cause. And if you're not treating the cause, you're treating an effect, which a lot of times, you know, makes you frustrated because you're treating and then you're not getting the effect that, you know, that you need. So I always am the advocate of trying something, and then do you have something to pivot if it doesn't work? And when I teach, I try to give, you know, different options so that if that doesn't work, you should know how to pivot.
Right.
And because at the end of the treatment, you want to see a change.
Right.
You want to see better range of motion, better strength. Whatever you tested in the beginning, you know, you should see normalization, or it's moving in the right direction.
Oh, I gotta stop you there. So when I was working on those runners last week, this one gal, she, you know, I was feeling around her ribs, and I had her lift her arm, and she's like, yeah, I'm having issues with my shoulder, and I'm like, oh, that totally relates to the ribs. So I did that, you know, I adjusted the ribs, you know, did that one technique that you showed us the last class, and then I had her do the range of motion again, and she had full range of motion, and she was like looking at me like, oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool.
It's pretty cool when you have those, and that's what got me into Strain Counterstrain in the first place, is that I went to a class and the same thing happened. The teacher would look around the room and see who had the worst posture, and then just by looking at them can say, okay, can you raise your arm up over your head? And sure enough, they can only do that. And they treated one rib, and all of a sudden the arm went up in the air, and my jaw about hit the ground, and I was like, how did you do that so fast?
Right.
And how does a rib create a shoulder problem?
Right.
And it was like, you know, paradigm shift for me, and that's where I was like, I need to learn this technique, and that's where I started my training, was because of that same kind of.
And that's why I'm here. It's like I am seeing the results, you know, with these people, and it's like, oh my gosh. It's like, I wish I had learned this from day one, because I've been practicing for 10 years, and this is the most effective technique I have come across. I am just, like you said, my jaw dropped too, you know? It's like, oh my gosh, full range of motion. And it's like, no pain, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I was a Con Ed junkie myself. I was taking a lot of continuing education classes, because what I learned in physical therapy school, it wasn't working. I was applying it like they told us to, but I wasn't seeing the results. And it wasn't until I found Strain Counterstrain was that I saw the results right in my face, and then I started doing it in the clinic, and I started getting similar results, and I was like, this is the most effective thing that I have taken to date. And I've taken a lot of other continuing education after that, and everything had its part, but I always come back to that as my foundation because of its effectiveness.
Yeah. This is something I'm gonna just keep learning, learning more about, because there's so much to it, and it's not just the muscles. I mean, you were talking about how it relates to the diaphragm, and you know, and getting more airflow, and you know, one gal thinking it was asthma, but it was really the diaphragm was impacting her breathing.
Yes.
So it's just amazing.
Yeah, the more that you learn anatomy and understand what certain things look like when they're not functioning properly, and the symptoms that they cause in clients, it really helps you with pattern recognition. For instance, with the diaphragm client that you were referring to, I used a reflex zone to check for diaphragm dysfunction, and she had it, and then I asked the questions of, do you have fatigue? And she said, yes, I have afternoon fatigue from 1 to 4 o'clock. I just, you know, tank. And then I said, do you have trouble taking a deep breath? And she's like, oh my God, yes. She never mentioned that in the history. A lot of people don't think that's important, but it does impact the musculoskeletal system. And if you're not getting enough oxygen, you can see how that can create, you know, tender points all over your body, just general tension. And it also freed up her shoulder. We didn't do anything to her shoulder, and her range of motion of her shoulder got better. So, you know, it's an undertreated area just because of lack of understanding of how to treat the diaphragm and all the attachments and the things that connect with the diaphragm. So that'll be a future class at some point, where we'll do a one-day class on the diaphragm. I think that would be great to give some good skills on how to correct breathing dysfunction and how to get people breathing properly for better musculoskeletal and just overall health.
Yeah. More classes coming up. I'm so looking forward to this. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.